Get Pucked.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Get Pucked podcast. Here with you again today, Matt, Dave, and Vito, and you might notice we are somewhere other than our own homes. We are, in fact, at Café Victoria's recording this episode today, located at 8600 L'Angelier in St. Leonard, Quebec. Gentlemen, hello. Good to see you in person. How's it going?
You're a lot taller than I expected, Matt.
I've been told this many times by many people. What can I say?
You suck.
My burden to bear, gentlemen. Yeah, scoot up a little bit, make you feel better. There you go. I want to, gentlemen, jump right into it because obviously there's been some really crazy developments since the last time we all got together. The most paramount one, of course, being the Habs got the first overall pick for the first time since 1980. I will not be modest and say that this is the first time in our collective lifetimes that this has happened. So it's kind of big news. With that being said, the now question steers towards who's it going to be. Overall consensus seems to think that it looks like it's going to be Shane Wright. I think most people would be in agreement that would be an absolute monster player to join the organization. But I'm more interested in, do you guys think it is going to be Shane Wright, or do you hold out for another player, Slavkovsky, if that's his name, Slavkovsky, what's his name? Slavkovsky, Cooley, whoever. I'm curious to know your takes on that.
Vito, you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Okay.
It's going to be Shane Wright. I mean, they've been talking about this guy as being, since the age of 14, as being the first overall pick. I know a lot of people are hard on him or saying, you know, he had a rough start or his season wasn't great. He wasn't the lead, he wasn't leading in points for his own team. But when you look at his actual season as it went, he had a slow start, but then he had 71 points in 41 games. You know, so if you're looking at that kind of player, I don't want to take the gamble in the sense that we go after somebody else. There is maybe one other player that I'm truly interested in, and that would probably be Cooley. But I think Shane Wright's the player to go, and there's obviously a need there in Montreal to get that second line center. Whether he starts as a 2C or not, we need it.
Yeah, every year there's a consensus number one, and then once the draft comes closer and closer, you kind of get this debate, you know, this like useless debate with Liney and Matthews that happened, with Taylor Hall, Tyler Seguin. I mean, it just seems to happen every year, and the number one consensus always goes number one. There's never, I don't think, ever been somebody a surprise number one overall draft pick.
Switches between like 2 and 3.
2 and 3, but never number one. Never number one. Shane Wright is a center. It's exactly what the Canadiens organization needs. Not that they should draft by need, but it fits. It's perfect. He's the best player available by far, I think. And I think they'd be foolish to not pick him first overall. So you're going to hear a lot of talk. A lot of people are going to be on social media. A lot of people are going to be talking about, oh, maybe they could pick somebody else. Maybe they could trade down, whatever. They're picking Shane Wright at number one, and that's that. I mean, I don't think there's any debate about it.
Well, there's a lot of people that have, you know, they prefer that the Habs draft Slavkovsky. And I'm not saying what I'm about to say. I'm not saying that I would compare him to Kotkaniemi, but there's almost that vibe of a Kotkaniemi feel in the sense that he's had a very strong Olympics. They're not the same style of player, but his stock really rose up after the Olympics, and that's kind of what happened with Kotkaniemi too, right? So I kind of don't want to go that route in terms of that gamble. Plus, he is a left winger. While Montreal technically does need a big body left winger, they do need that. They kind of need a bit of everything, but I don't want to take a chance. Over the years, Montreal's struggled to get centers. We have Suzuki, and now we're going to be drafting potentially the first line center, so I want to keep it that way.
No, this makes perfect sense. I'm in a complete agreement with you guys. I think there's no doubt in my mind. Oh, we have a special guest. Ciao. So it's going to be Shane Wright, in my opinion, too. I think there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be Shane Wright. I think the stars align in this case. He's the best player available at the first overall pick, in addition to drafting for a positional need of the organization. Now the interesting question is, let's say they do go for it and they do take him, right? Like, let's say this is a foregone conclusion. What do they do with him next year? A lot of people suggesting he's got the talent right to the NHL. Other people are suggesting, nope, keep him in juniors. Some are saying give him a couple games and then see where he falls. What do you think is going to happen with this kid? Do you think he cracks roster right off the bat, right out the gate, and he's there for the season? Or is it more advantageous for him to kind of continue to dominate at a lower level before he makes the jump, knowing that the Habs are likely not there with just him yet to move to take that next step? You know, is it best for him and the organization if he doesn't come? Curious. Vito, start us off, baby.
Well, look, we're drafting him first overall, right? No, nobody's saying that you can't send him back down to the OHL if you see that he's struggling. Give him the first 10 games to see how he's going. If he has a good camp and, in those 10 games he's scoring goals, he's producing, or at the very least 5 pick that we had, and he had a very strong camp, and then later on in the season he struggled a little bit. So if you're willing to do that with KK, and technically Shane Wright's supposed to be a better player, then do the same thing with Shane Wright. Give him the 10 games, see how he does, and if it doesn't fit, then send him back to the OHL. It's never a bad thing to send the guy back down to develop more and dominate the league that he's playing in. But that's how I see it. But do I think he's going to play in the NHL? I do think he's going to play in the NHL next season. Maybe not as a 2C, maybe even as a winger to learn the game a little bit. But
what was the last time? Oh, here, give me this. When was the last time a first overall pick didn't start in the NHL?
Last year, Owen Power went back to college.
He did. And then he showed up in the league.
He showed up at the end.
Right, he did show up. Yeah.
I mean, college is different than the OHL for sure. But I'm with Vito here. I think that there's no such thing as overdevelopment, right? But there is such a thing as people who get rushed to the NHL. And that you've seen that time and time again. KK is a good example. You look at Luke Shen in Toronto. He's like one of the most famous ones, I think. Just completely rushed, have a stellar first 3 years of your career, and then just nosedive afterwards. And I think that Shane Wright, the best thing to do with Shane Wright would be to you select him, you invite him to training camp, you give him those 9 games. And then you send him back to junior, especially that he missed out on that year, right? Because of COVID. Yep. So you gotta, that would be the development way to go, I think. And then you invite him back, maybe at the end of the year or maybe the next following year, but you don't want to rush a guy like that. And especially on a team that like the Canadiens, who aren't probably going to be world beaters next year. And also are going to slot him obviously in that second line center. You just know that that's what's happening.
He's probably gonna start as a 2C, and then if he struggles, they're gonna just move
that's the wrong move. So I wouldn't keep him up, and I think that they'll be cautious with him, and I think that he will be sent back to junior.
Oh, you really think he's gonna go back to the juniors?
He'll play 9 games and get sent back. That's my prediction.
Okay.
It wouldn't be the worst thing ever, right? Like, especially again, I come back to it. The next year's draft supposedly supposed to be real deep, really, really great players. I don't predict the Habs are going to get the first overall pick next year. I can already guarantee you pretty much. I don't see that happening. But could they finish in a position of in the top 10? Absolutely. So if you allow your future stars to develop more, and you don't run into that kind of KK problem or the Galchenyuk issues or things like that, maybe it's for the best. But that does bring up something interesting when we talk about the team, because now I'm curious to know, gentlemen, about Mr. Kent Hughes. So there was talk, I can't remember if it was him explicitly saying it or if people were just kind of taking what he said and going with it, about them initially maybe making some big splashes in the offseason and free agency. As of late, he's tempered those expectations, and he kind of mentioned saying, no, it doesn't seem like he's going to go and try to make this unbelievable acquisition, but he's looking for more veteran presence to help the very young team that's there. So my question to you is this: since we've kind of heard it both ways, is this like a ploy, and he's just trying to be a marketing guy, making sure that no matter what he does, the expectations have been tempered, or is he sending out a message to other GMs, or not GMs rather, it's free agency, but to players? What do you think he's doing by kind of changing this narrative a little bit on the fly?
I think that honestly, the first time he said it, I forget what media appearance it was, but I think it was kind of lost in translation, because I remember the question was a French question, I believe, and it kind of got lost in translation. I think he kind of said that we're trying to make cap room by dealing Petrie and dealing with some cap situations so that we could go after free agents. And then I think people kind of took that as they're going to be big in the pool of free agency. It never really made sense to me why the Canadiens would be big on free agents this year, unless you're going to make a huge splash with Gaudreau or something like that, or going after an RFA. To me, it's not the time to do it, right? You're kind of in that slow rebuild. It didn't really make sense to me in terms of a big free agent splashes, especially with a ton of young guys coming up in the coming years. So to me, I think he just clarified his point. The next time he got up in front of the media, he just said, look, I'm not going to be in. They're obviously going to sign free agents, right? That every team does. They're going to figure it out. Maybe they'll have a bigger one on defense, most likely, to replace Petrie as a veteran. But other than that, I don't think he's playing any mind games. I don't think anything like that. I certainly hope he's not tempering expectations, because we had about a decade of someone tempering expectations, and I don't think that's the way I want to go for the next decade. So
I think he's being more realistic when you think
that's
of it, right?
that's it.
Because
That's
when
what I
you look
agree
at
with
it
you,
and
Vito.
say, even if he wants to sign free agents, unless he clears a significant amount of cap, it's going to be really hard for him to do that. And yeah,
well, he's moving Weber contract. That's a guarantee at this point,
but
right?
even if he moves the Weber contract, they were so over the cap, and and it still counts, right? So you'd have to shed more than that. You'd almost have to replace player for player. So if you're going to move Petrie, yeah, the 6.25 comes off the books.
Yeah, that's
but
right.
he's going to have to, and if he plans to say Letang, as that's the rumor, you have to hope that Letang only wants 6.25. And so that it fits. He's
Well,
almost at that
it's
point where
no, but
dollar
it's
for dollar.
Petrie's contract gone. You got Weber off the books. You might have Price going back on the long term IR again. You got players
I hope
like
not.
you got players like Matthew Perreault, who's likely not coming back. So whatever cap he was taking, these little incremental ones, right? You got, well, I don't know about millions, but you do have at least 3 different players that are going to be off that might accumulate up to like 2.5. You know, these little ads will add up in the long run.
The only way this could actually work is they move. Like I said, you move Petrie, and you basically replace him with somebody else. You somehow manage to move Hoffman's contract to get some dollars off the books. You have to figure out what you're going to do with Armia and Byron, because those are 2 guys that are taking up $3.4 million a piece to be on your third and fourth lines.
line.
Or
Yep.
in Byron's case, unfortunately, health is an issue, and he's basically $3.4 million to not even play. And what do you do with Drouin? What happens with Drouin? I mean, he's $5.5 million.
He's going to be a player on the team. I can't see him moving.
He's got 1 year left after this season.
I can't see him moving.
So I mean,
I'd be very surprised if he moves.
I would move him.
Yeah, I would move him, but I'd be surprised if they find somebody to take him.
No, well, I mean, there's always teams that are interested. There's always going to be teams. I mean, I hate to go back to this because Dave has said it so many times. NHL GMs are some of the dumbest GMs, is what Dave has preached often, right? So they're always going to take a gamble on somebody like Drouin, who's a former 3rd overall pick, who is still in his prime years when it comes to forwards and whatnot. And maybe he's just a guy that needs a different, change of scenery.
He's also a guy who's getting $5.5 million and has 2 bionic wrists now.
But he's okay.
You know what I mean?
1 year left, so teams are going to take a gamble on someone like that.
Then what?
I think the play would be to keep him on the team and then build him up to the trade deadline. I think that would be the play as opposed to the offside.
In your mind, he's pretty much moving.
Well, it depends. It depends on how, and it depends on how the season plays out, right? If those risks are finished, I mean, nobody's going to take him, right? No one's going to take a risk on him at that point.
I mean,
and also,
we already got Gallagher with 2 busted hands.
and look, is he going to hit that 30 again? Ever?
Maybe.
Never.
Oh boy,
Absolutely never.
We're going back.
let's get you on record, Vito. Once again,
You guys got me on record already.
All right. I want to talk about another thing that's very topical: the playoffs. Obviously, a lot of people must be very, very. I don't know what the word is. I guess bewildered by certain exits that have happened in the first round. I know the 3 of us took Minnesota, and we all look like fools. That was kind of a bit surprising. But I think some of the more interesting talks is going to be about, obviously, Toronto. Toronto last night had another first-round exit. You can argue that they might have played better. They might have deserved it. There's moral victories here to be had, certainly. But at the end of the day, it still comes down to the fact that team can't get out of the first round. Tampa moves on. Tampa is not the world beater juggernauts that they appeared the last 2 years. I think they're going to have an exit in the second round to Florida. That's my prediction. But my question is, what was the biggest shock to you guys, aside from Minnesota, clearly, because we all had Minnie? Who was the biggest shock, truly? And what is a matchup you're looking forward to in the second round? I know there's 2 Game 7s tonight, but if you want to go ahead and assume a winner for that one and say who it's going to be, I'd like to hear what you're looking forward to the most in the second.
Honestly, the surprise for me is I really thought Calgary was going to dominate Dallas a little more than expected. Dallas is giving them a run for their money, and at this point, you got to think it's anybody's game. At this point, any one of them could win. But I really didn't think Dallas was going to give Calgary such a hard time. There's a couple of players on Calgary's roster that's playing very cold right now, or they're struggling, Toffoli being one of them. I guess when it comes to Toronto, I'm guys, I don't like the Leafs. You know this. I've advocated
No
this.
kidding.
I'm not a Leafs fan.
Really?
But give credit where credit is due. They played a lot better than they did last season or last playoffs against the Montreal Canadiens. They showed a lot more character. This one is a tough loss for them. Yes, it was against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are back-to-back Stanley Cup champs, but they're not the same Tampa Bay Lightning as you said. and they brought him to Game 7, and it was a 2-1 loss. That's a tough loss for the Leafs, and you gotta kind of feel bad for the fan base to a certain degree. But with that being said, they're missing certain pieces on that roster. There's not enough sandpaper on that roster, in my opinion. That bottom six needs some work. They need some guys that are willing to sacrifice the body and block shots. I mean, at the last game, by the end of the second period, I think it was like 28 block shots for Tampa Bay and only 12 for Toronto. So there's something missing. That you got to think that change is coming now for the Toronto Maple Leafs, because they're wasting those years for Austin Matthews and Marner and Tavares and so on, and they're just not getting past that first round.
What are you looking for in the second round?
What do you mean?
Like, what matchup are you looking for the most in the second round? That is the most exciting to do.
Battle of Florida, man.
How is that exciting? I don't know. To me, like, you're that invested in. Well, you are invested in Florida. Hey,
Well, okay, listen. When was the last time you saw the Florida Panthers arena sold out?
Okay, that's exciting, but I mean, like, does it matter who their opponent is, really? Like, I don't know. Florida Tampa does nothing for me.
Well, it's because Florida and Tampa doesn't do anything, but at the same time, I almost feel like Tampa is going to lose, and I don't like Tampa either.
All right, okay, fine. So,
you know what I mean? So
I get it.
I'm just looking for the Tampa loss, but at the same time, you got to kind of feel good for Florida. It's since, what was it, 96? That they hadn't gotten to the playoffs or had that kind of success. They're there, man. It's a good story. It's a feel-good story for a team that was basically, everyone was saying, relocate them.
Yeah, no, I feel you. All right, so look, Toronto. The issue with Toronto, I think, is the coaching, right? I mean, like you mentioned the block shots. They collapsed early, Tampa, right? Right off the bat, they collapsed. It was going to be a Game 7 type of game where everything's going to be blocked, and Toronto didn't adjust whatsoever. The whole game, it was just shot after shot, trying to pinpoint that top corner or the bottom corner, and everything was blocked. And at one point, that coaching staff has to, grab the iPads and, guys, you got to find a better way to get to the net. You guys got to find a better way to get the puck to the net. So many times they're on a power play or there's a ton of traffic in front of the net, and you have William Nylander circling the offensive zone.
They're just a skillful team.
You have Morgan Riley having a wide open spot with about 3 players in the slot, and he doesn't take it. He moves it, tries to move it to Matthews on a finesse pass. At one point, it's up to the coach. And again, Sheldon Keefe got out-coached by Dominic Ducharme last year. Like, let that sink in, okay? They started the series strong, and then the Canadiens made adjustment, and the Leafs made 0 adjustments. And again this year, I find it's the exact same situation. 0 adjustment to Tampa Bay.
And we'll agree that John Cooper is a much better coach than Dominic Ducharme and Sheldon Keefe.
Exactly. So, to me, I don't think they're going to get rid of Dubas. I think he has 1 year left in him, unless Barry Trotz wants to go into a GM role, and you get the interest there. I don't even see them making that move anyways.
Do you think they make a coaching change?
I don't think so, but I think they should, but I don't think they will. I think that they're going to stick with what it is. It's always telling. It's always telling for me is you go and you look immediately after a loss. You go look at the people closest to the team. So Darren Dreger, very close to the Toronto Maple Leafs. You go look at other media members, and all of them are towing the company line of, this was a great effort. No shame in losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Don't expect big changes. Where do you think they're getting that message from? They're getting that message because that's what's going to happen.
Think about it this way, right? If they go another year and it's another first-round exit next year,
you clean house. Even Shanny's gone. Even Shanny's gone. This is, I know a lot of people are trying to frame this as, oh, there's no shame in this, but I tweeted this yesterday. There's absolutely shame in it, man. The threshold for the Toronto Maple Leafs is to get out of the first round, and they still can't do it. That is insane. You could say, oh, it was a Stanley Cup. Next year, the way that this playoff format is, it is extremely likely that they face the Tampa Bay Lightning again next year. So what, next year again? Oh, they lost in 7, but it's the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then the year after that, the same thing over and over again. At what point does it become not okay to lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning? At what point is the NHL about winning and about moving forward and not about moral victories? The Leafs have had 10 years of moral victories. Oh, look, they didn't blow a 3-1 lead this year. Oh, look, they didn't do. It's constantly that they need to make change. What I'm looking for.
Some would call that progress, Dave. You didn't blow a 3-1 lead. Some would call that progress.
Yeah, not enough progress. Moving on to the next round, looking ahead, I really hope Calgary wins because the Battle of Alberta really interests me. And even Edmonton, Dallas would interest me because they've had some good battles when I was a kid with like Marty Turco and George Larac and stuff like that. That really excites me. But I like Calgary. I want to see them go forward. So that to me would be the matchup. Colorado, St. Louis. I don't
George
know.
Larac. That's the name that came to mind in that series.
I'll always remember that series, okay, because Marty Turco went out to play the puck, and George Larac came barreling down on him, and Turco got so scared he let the puck go, and they ended up scoring, and a huge game, a series shifting.
George, do you hear that? Dave wants you on the podcast. Come be a special guest.
That's right, George. What's next?
What's next? Well, I guess final question for you boys is there's so many different storylines going on in the playoffs right now. I mean, you got the Crosby injury and how that's affecting that series. You got obviously the underperforming Flames and their stars and everything that's going on there. There's goaltending that was happening just in the Edmonton series alone, where Mike Smith was abysmal at home and Jonathan Quick on the road was phenomenal, and then they ended up coming out and win. So my question is, out of all the storylines, let's not talk about Leafs and like the storyline. Would they get out of the first round? That's passe at this point. What's the storyline either that has happened and is now finalized or is still ongoing that you have the most interest in continuing in the playoffs?
I would have to say the story I'm interested in right now at the moment.
I'm going to take a guess.
Go for it.
Does it involve a certain Sidney Crosby?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
You guessed it right. Guys, I'm predictable that way. I want to know if Sidney Crosby shows up for Game 7.
That's fair. That's huge.
I do believe that if Sidney Crosby was there for Game 6, it would have been a different result. And it's not because
I
just
agree.
a Crosby fan. Crosby looked 5 years younger the way
It's
he was
incredible.
He's
Amazing playoffs.
the guy is he's amazing. Period. Still at the age of 35 years old, he's still able to play the way he's playing.
But
It just goes to show his work ethic. So for me, the storyline is going to be the current storyline that I'm focused on, because I'm not ready to start talking about or thinking about the second round and what storylines we're going to look at that, because there's still a lot of games and a lot of hockey to play out before we know what's really happening in the second round. But with that being said, it's the Sidney Crosby, and does Pittsburgh take it in Game 7 and put the Rangers out of their misery? Because honestly, I don't feel like the Rangers should go to the second round.
right. Well, look, it's going to be interesting. Not only does he come back, but how does he look, right? Because he's had that concussion history. It's scary, right? Like, you don't know what it could be due to a player, right? And so to me, that's a very good storyline.
I'll remind you about a certain time he came back while still having a concussion.
Yeah, I'm
and he
not
scored
saying
5 points against the New York Islanders. Albeit it's the New York Islanders.
I didn't say I was worried. I'm just saying that's a storyline to look forward to.
Yeah.
You know,
It is.
I mean, it's kind of a built-in excuse when you have a concussion, like you're I don't know how many a concussion, and you're
Did you
coming
think
back
that
to
hit
it.
was dirty?
I don't think so. Unfortunately,
There wasn't a bit of a chicken wing on that.
I don't think so. I don't think so. The positioning, I mean, it was a very fast play. I don't see it as a dirty hit. And I'm a guy who, you know, like that Steckel hit, that was dirty. You know, I'm able to say when a play is dirty. I don't think Jacob Trouba meant to hit him in the head. I don't think so.
Let me ask you, okay? Because that hit, it was Trouba who laid it out, right?
Mhm.
A few years back, did you think Trouba would develop into the type of defenseman that he is now? Because he's made some questionable hits in the last 2 seasons that have taken out players. I never saw Trouba being that kind of a player.
He's a really big guy.
He's a really
Yeah.
big
Yeah,
guy.
so that's always something you got to that's always something you got to factor in with the big players, right? When they go and give you a hit, it's not their fault that they're that much bigger than you. So when they drop the shoulder, where an average player might hit you in the chest, they might be like more upper chest, maybe almost like lower throat area, and it's the nature of the beast. Was the intent there? You know, sometimes you see a guy go for the head, it's intent. The arm goes up. I didn't
but
see
that's
that.
the thing. Maybe I'm a little biased because I'm.
You think?
I'm a
Yeah, you
fan of
think?
Sidney Crosby, but when you actually look at the hit, there was a different angle that was presented, and you kind of see the elbow going up. Now, was it the follow through of the hit?
Well,
Very
that's what I
possible.
think. It's the
But
follow
I mean,
through.
but at the same time, it wasn't. I kind of see both angles. That if they would have called, you know, if the player safety committee would have gotten involved, they'd be like, "Oh, because it's Sidney Crosby, this is what's happening." And if they don't get involved, then you're gonna have people like myself that are saying, maybe it should have been looked at, even at a fine or something. I don't know. But
Nah,
at the
I
end of the day,
I think it was okay.
Hockey's a tough ass sport.
Yeah.
We know this, and things like this can happen. It's just sad, and it's unfortunate that it happened to somebody like Sidney Crosby, who was on a tear and was playing fantastic in the playoffs. And the NHL and hockey today still needs Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's where my next storyline is going, is Connor McDavid, man, if he could pull it off, right? Because there has never been I saw someone tweet this today, so I'm going to steal it. There's never been a generational talent that hasn't won a Stanley Cup, right? Every time, everybody has their cup, and McDavid seems to be the furthest away from it. Well, unless you count like Austin Matthews, I guess. But you know what I mean? Like who has faith in Mike Smith. Like it's sad to say, then he pitches a shutout in game 7. So it's kind of a weird situation. But for me, Connor McDavid, I mean, he willed that win yesterday on his back pretty much.
Oh man, that second goal, the hustle on that second goal, holy crap.
Jonathan Quick played outstanding. I didn't think Jonathan Quick had anything left in him, to be honest. And I still picked LA to beat Edmonton because I didn't think Mike Smith had anything.
That was literally one of the reasons I put up when we were making our predictions was that LA would win because who's the better goalie? Jonathan Quick or Mike Smith? And I mean, if we're talking about Mike Smith in his prime, it would have been a different question.
Jonathan Quick in that first period yesterday made some amazing saves, man. He kind of I thought, oh man, this is not looking good for Edmonton, but they pulled it off finally. So to me, Connor McDavid, that's the storyline I want to see going forward. I guess Colorado too. Like what can they actually get it done?
Are they too well rested now?
No, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that at all.
Do you think? Okay, I know we made our Stanley Cup predictions in a previous episode, but do you think Colorado's the team to beat?
Now it's going to be hard to argue against that. Yeah, for sure. I mean, unless you want to give respect to Tampa. Look, Vasilevsky looked phenomenal in the past 2 games, so now maybe Vasilevsky's heating up. But goals like crazy throughout the series. Yeah, but that's what I mean. The last 2 games, though, he stepped up, and now the only issue now for Tampa is Braden Point, right? Like how injury. They said it's a leg injury. It looked groin.
No, it looked like his quad. He was holding it at the top of his leg.
Yeah, it definitely looked bad. He tried to come back, didn't really.
Oh, I think he might be out. If he's
that's
playing,
what I'm saying.
If he's playing, it's gonna be minimal
minutes.
That's
huge. If Braden Point's out, I mean, that's huge for their depth, right? So that's another storyline to look at.
Before.
Okay,
it's a Habs related question. If there's one player, if there's only one move and one player that Hughes is able to make to get this player off the team.
Off the team.
Gone. Yeah. It's the only trade he can make. It's the only player that any team is desiring to trade for. Just one. Each of you are allowed, and myself are allowed to make one move. Dave, who is it?
Oh man, that's a tough question. It's gonna have to be Brendan Gallagher. I'm gonna have to get him off that.
You're gonna get a lot salary. Of people dislike.
I don't care. You need to get him off. You need to get emotion out of here. You need to get him off the team if you're gonna have a healthy salary cap in the next few years. I think Brendan Gallagher is about to drop off a cliff, and I might be wrong, and I hope I'm wrong, but I'm worried about him. So it would be Brendan Gallagher for me. I debated between him and Price, but I think that
I think there's more of an immediate replacement for Brendan Gallagher as a winger, not so much the heart and the engine of a line, than there is for somebody like Carey Price.
Well, that's what I mean. That's why I went with Brendan.
I mean, first off, how dare you? How dare you? That is future Montreal Canadiens captain Brendan Gallagher.
I agree.
So
this was a magic question.
All right, magic question. See, I have a more realistic answer, and then I have the magic answer, right? So the realistic one is because it's happening, I believe, is Jeff Petrie is going to move, right? That's the contract that they have to unload, right? He wants gone. They want to end amicably. Yes, he left that little thing at the end there, whatever, but that's a lot of money to get off the cap, and you need every dollar of it. That's the guy. Now, flip it around, and obviously, if Price is done and he's no longer going to be the guy, yeah, that's the contract you want to move to. And then, of course, you can talk Gallagher and stuff, but I don't see Gallagher moving. I don't think they're going to want him out of that room. He won't produce like he ever used to, but I don't think you want him gone from the team. So realistically, there's Mike Hoffman as well as somebody who you might want to consider, but
are you going to name the whole roster and leave me
no,
with nothing?
No. Well, half the roster, if they moved, I wouldn't really care. But yes.
This is a magic question. Your pick is going to be Jeff Petrie, who's obviously going to be moved. Like, this is your one shot. He's giving you one shot.
Yeah, I told you one name. That was my question.
One opportunity to seize everything you ever wanted.
Players, cover yourself, and I'm the one that's screwed.
It's still Jeff Petrie. It's still Jeff Petrie. I mean, because as magic as the question might be, I'm living in the real world, boys, and in the real world, this is something that is very likely to happen. And I think if he can make it happen and make the trade return, that's the only question. Is he going to just do it to get him off the team and take like a passable return, or does he actually get something back? And so if he could get something back, then that's the move I want him to make.
So for me, I would say it has to be one of Hoffman or Drouin, but the move I'd probably move on from, it'd probably be Hoffman more than Drouin. And the reason why is because Hoffman, there's still 3 years at $4.5 million, and he's 32 years old, right? Now he's still he still put up some decent numbers, but he didn't put up the numbers that we expect him to put. He wasn't on a necessarily a 30 goal pace or anything like that. But he's a goal scorer, so he did that fine. But man, there's so many times during the season, during certain games, where he just had these brain cramps that were so brutal to even watch, and just defensively, it was just so poor. I know he's not known for his defensive game, but I think he's the $4.5 million. He's the player that's getting paid $4.5 million on the cap that I'd be willing to move away from. But it wouldn't surprise me if Drouin also too, because I mean that experiment's over. We can move on from that. It's just
I disagree.
You disagree?
I disagree. He has not had his shot under Martin St. Louis yet. He hasn't had his shot.
That's fair.
I think he's at his all-time low in
coaches,
stock.
How many coaches is he going to have to go to say he didn't have his first shot with this coach? He didn't have his first
Well,
shot with that coach.
Bottom line, he's been hurt a lot the past couple of years. He's got his surgery. He had a ton of time to recover this time around. He's under Martin St. Louis this time around as well. I think you're in a much better position to actually have him play the season and see what's up. I don't see... He's at an all-time low in stock. Why would you try to move him? You're going to get nothing for it.
I agree, but I also agree with Dave's point earlier on when he said if you're going to move Drouin, then raise his stock and do it at the trade deadline. And at the same time, with 1 year left as a rental, we've seen a lot worse rentals get moved for quite a bit. So, I mean, I agree with that. But at some point, you're going to look and say, okay, Drouin is probably going to be the one that's going to go and he's going to move on from this team too. And maybe he would benefit from moving on. But I'm going to go back to it's Hoffman. For me, it's Hoffman. You gotta get that contract out. 32 years old. You talk about Gallagher's going to fall off a cliff. I mean, how much longer is Hoffman going to go with that style of player that he is?
No, listen, you never know. Maybe he has a turnaround season. Maybe they all have a turnaround season next year. The bar is so low, it's possible. It's possible. Maybe they go back to the drawing board and actually figure out what to do with the power play. And then all of a sudden he starts to put up 30 goals again because he's a power play specialist.
If you're going to figure out what you're going to do on the power play, you're going to have to move on from Alex Burrows because he's just not it.
Yeah. But listen, there's a bunch of on that. We can talk about that next time about what they're going to do and who should take over what. But for today, for this episode, this unique and special episode on location at Cafe Victoria's. So good to see you guys in person. We should do this more often. But I think now we're at the point, we're just about lunchtime. I think we're going to be ordering up some food. I'm not sure if you guys picked out what you're going to get.
Not yet.
I'm on the fence too. There's a couple of good sandwiches I got my eyes on. You? What are you going to have?
I'm going to take everything.
Everything.
I came here hungry and I'm ready to eat. I'm going to take everything.
There you go.
I came here fat. I'm going to leave here fat.
You put on a little bit of weight. A little bit.
COVID. COVID. Sedentary lifestyle.
We'll talk about that another time.
I had to eat my emotions this year with this Habs season.
That, and I'm sure many people like the same. But for everybody else, thank you so much for listening. If you have the opportunity, please try and swing by Cafe Victoria's. Give them a check out. Go check them out online, cafevictorias.com. .ca. I always mess that up. For Dave and Vito, I'm Matt in person, and this was
Get Pucked.